right now.
Coming from Cincinnati, this is the Spin Lob.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spin Lob. We're here with Season 2, Episode 9. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we were at the 1-year mark. It was about this time when we kicked off the podcast. It was right before COVID was really kicking off, and I think this is year 1. Is that right?
Yeah, we are definitely getting into that spot. I was thinking about that the other day, just like how hopeful we were getting everything set to and prepping everything for like the season in the fall, and then everything went completely
sour. Yeah. And I would like to give you props for how well your Wi-Fi and technology, knock on wood, has held up for the past 5 or 6 podcasts. So congratulations on that.
Why would you know it's going to fall now? I'm going to be cut out the entire rest of this episode because you said that.
Yeah, probably. So today's episode is with 2 Ohio water polo referees, Eli Fellers and from Columbus, and Greg Sanchez from the Dayton area. They're going to be providing us with kind of a small update on the new rules and how it's going in this spring season, and maybe some misconceptions of application of those new rules or some understanding of them. The Spin Lob is produced and recorded live by Mike Jones and Nick Helwig. It's supported by the Ohio Squirrels Water Polo Club. You're never too old to get into the game. Go nuts. And also by Marlins Water Polo. For the love of the game, there's Marlins Water Polo. This podcast is all about Ohio water polo and how we fit in the national scene. It's a combination of what's going on in Ohio, the Midwest, and the national level. So once again, another impactful weekend with water polo around the area, in the Midwest, and the country. Nick, why don't you give us an update of what's going on?
Yeah, there was a ton of water polo this weekend again. I think that's going to be how it is from now until, season championships for college and high school. And so, we don't even have time to run through all the scores, let alone even most of them. But some of the big college games with our neighbors to the north, Michigan beat Salem in a doubleheader this weekend. And Indiana, unfortunately, lost to number 4 Arizona twice. And I didn't catch if those were in Indiana or out in Arizona. Hopefully they're getting to Arizona because the weather was a little nicer this weekend, probably out there. I want to give a big promotion to the podcast for March 11th, where we are having the author and creator and director of the newly released Cap Up documentary about the Harvest Westlake water polo team coming on and talking to us about his experience with that and how that all went. So make sure you guys check out that episode. To recap some of the boys high school, we've had 2 tournaments since our last episode. We had the Arlington tournament last weekend, and then this weekend we had the Princeton invite, and so that brings us actually up to game 55 just on the boys side. And I believe we are at, on the girls side, we hit after the games this weekend, we are up to game 30-ish. So we are cruising along with a lot of games. With the boys side, the action started. Very first game of the day was two of the teams tied for first place in Cincinnati, Sycamore versus Princeton at 7:30 a.m. Battling out for that top spot. Sycamore jumped out to an early in that game, but with a short bench and a strong defensive switch by Princeton, they were able to tie it up late in the game. But in the end, Sycamore prevailed 11-9 in that game. There was also another nail biter as Milford and Napoleon battled it out on Sunday, where Napoleon edged out Milford 11-10. And there's a lot of other tough games throughout the entire tournament, both regionally games as well as cross-region games. Right now, the rankings are shaping up like this. In the North, UA is in sole possession of the top spot, with Napoleon and St. Charles right on their heels. In the South, Sycamore shares the number 1 spot with St. X now, as St. X beat Milford over the weekend to take a lead in their series. And Sycamore is up there with an undefeated regionals record of 3-0 against Mason, Princeton, and Walnut Hills now. On the girls' side for high school, we saw actually, we didn't get to see because I was actually coaching at Princeton, but there was a big tournament up in Napoleon, the Courtney Fisher Classic. Those scores are still coming in, so I'll have to update those on our next podcast. And so that does kind of change how the rankings might be. But the rankings prior to those scores, see in the South, Maverick, Princeton, and Sycamore all tied for first, as neither of them have a regional loss. And then in the North region, we have a tie between Napoleon and Upper Arlington, as well as those two teams have not lost, or at least had not until this weekend. So when those scores come in, that's going to change that pretty quickly. And with that, that brings us to our new, well, I guess it's not new anymore, our new top plays of the week. And Mike, you jinxed it. My new sound effect is gone for it. So we'll have to find that again for next week. Anyways, so
That's
our
okay.
our top plays. I was getting all creative with it. Oh, well. Our top plays actually come last week. Yeah, we're all about the goalie last week and some of the stellar saves that they're making. So this week, obviously, maybe not obviously, but we're going to get into more of people getting the ball past the goalie. And our first one is from UA's Avery Voss in a game against Napoleon this morning. And it was in the first quarter, and a long set pass came into center, just a little too short for him to do anything with normally. So instead, Avery does a little quick foot flick, and the ball flips straight over him and right past the goalie's shoulder. The goalie had no clue what was going on that one. Keeping up with UA, on the girls' side, Samantha Schaefer gets an extraordinary goal from center in the first play of the game. She gets a set pass in. 3 girls are crashing hard in on her, and she steps up and does one really hard pump fake and just buries it upper corner. One of those things that you teach and just love to see. If you weren't awake at 7:30 on Saturday, you missed a heck of a game. And we're in late into the game. It is tied up at 9. Princeton had stormed back when Peter Hosfeld, the center for Sycamore, receives a pass from the point, and he just rips a backhand past the goalie to give Sycamore lead, and from there, Sycamore does not give up that lead. Now, this one coming in from Gannon, I think just seems rude. The 2-meter from Gannon, Nicole Weichman gets this a pass inside at the 2, and then she just starts backing her defender up and keeps going until she backs the defender all the way into the goalie, and then just steps out and slams the ball home from like less than a meter from the goal line. I believe it was against VMI. And in that game, she ends up tying the record for most goals. Now, 2 meters weren't the only ones to score. In the Walnut Hills Sycamore game, Walnut Hills Barry Bates is going to get a nod as he pulls out a deep lob from left field. I mean, we're talking almost half court. He just sinks it into the side netting. Just one of those ones, even as an opposing coach, like that was really nice. And it kept actually the game within 1 for them. And another outside shooter was a driver from Wittenberg, Emma, and she drives in and does a hard post up and gets that ball in there and then steps back and just kind of can lay one out into the upper net. Now, not every shot this weekend got by. And on Thursday in the Sycamore Mason girls game, in the fourth quarter, a Mason player steals the ball and she goes down and is on a tear, is one on nobody with the goalie. And as she kicks up and goes to shoot, Sophie Campbell for Sycamore just comes tearing out of the cage, gets up nice and high, and blocks the ball high and wide on that shot to prevent that goal. And then the last one of the night, a lot of these pools in Ohio are shallow deep. And so a lot of people think that playing shallow end goalie is easy, but they forget that the goal is much, much larger than in the deep end. And so there's a lot bigger target. So when it comes to a 5 meter, that's even harder. You're standing on the goal line and you have very little reaction time. But for senior goalie Kevin Runke of St. X, he had no problem in the third quarter of the UA tournament, turning back a 5-meter shot done by Napoleon. And so that kind of wraps up a lot of shooting, a lot of blocking for the past, week and a half. Tons of other good shots. I know I saw this weekend and just can't even remember all of them. So, but with that, I would like to turn our attention to our guest tonight. And Mike, if you want to take over from there.
Sure. Nick, I got a question for you. You talked about these rankings at the beginning of your segment and within each region. Is that going to stay put for a while, these two split regions across the state, like a north and a south, or what are your thoughts on that?
We're kind of seeing how it's going right now. It seems pretty good because it makes it easier to have the ranking games. You're not like, well, we don't get to play St. Francis, or we're not going to see, St. Charles or UA. And so you don't really get ranked against teams you never see. And so it makes your dual matches really important as well in the South, as well as the North. And then I know in the North, they're up to about 8 varsity teams themselves. And then, down here in the South, we're at 5 to 6 teams as well, or 6 to 7, I'm sorry, depending on the year. And so really, at least on the boys side, we almost need that regional spot as well. On the girls side, they're a little less numbers, but so that kind of fluctuates between if they need it or just have a big state tournament.
Okay, good. Yeah, I agree. They used to have regionals back in the day when I was a player and when I was a ref, and I think it's a good concept. So hopefully that keeps the momentum going, and I agree the simplicity of it. So. All right, so main event. So tonight we have 2 special guests. One is a repeat from last year. We Greg Sanchez, who came on and talked to us a little bit about officiating and things like that, as well as his time in his role as a nurse all over the Dayton area. He's well known up there, of course, with all the things going on with the COVID situation at the time. We're also brought on Eli Fellers, Columbus area. I'll let him make a formal introduction about himself, but I know both of these for a pretty long time now. I played against Eli for several years while I was in the Squirrels, and I've ref with Greg for 10 years, which has been great. So gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Hey everybody.
So, Greg, we kind of already know you a little bit, but we'll allow you to give a, hey, how's it going, since it's been a couple months. But Eli, why don't you give us kind of an update on, your background of water polo, how you started playing, things like that, where you played, and then, some of the refereeing experience you've had for the past couple of years.
Yeah, sure. I grew up a small town just north of Dayton, Troy. I went to college at Bowling Green, which is actually where I started playing. I had a buddy who joined the team at Ohio State and told me how much fun he'd had, and decided to see if we had a team, and we did, and joined the team, and basically fell in love with the game as soon as that very first practice. So, I played there for 4 years, then graduated, moved to Columbus, played with the Columbus Masters team for 4 or 5 years. And then just kind of my body told me it was time to stop playing, and started reffing about 2012. Just high school stuff, some college stuff, and then about 2017, 2018, I started getting really heavy into USA water polo and really trying to elevate my game as far as reffing goes. So I did that. I've been doing that for 3 years, going out to California a couple of times a year. Did the ODP Nationals, JOs the last time it was around. And then this year I got a chance to ref the CWPA varsity this last about a month ago when everything really kicked off, and that was kind of my first experience with that. But yeah, so this is probably my 9th high school season. Just really happy to be back doing it. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Very nice. I mean, you're about to hit your 10-year mark. That's freaking awesome. Congratulations. And it's great to see progression. Sometimes people might just stay the course, just do the same level, and that's fine too. but it sounds like you've really picked it up over the past 3, 4, 5 years and started embracing that next level. So I commend you for that, because I think that's another aspect that needs to keep growing, is just getting better with the officials. So that's great. Mr. Sanchez, how are things going in your world? I know you've been actively reffing alongside Eli. Any updates from your end?
Everything's good for my end. Last time we talked, I was working a lot. A lot of stuff going on with COVID patients, so I was doing my normal job, and I was helping with infectious disease teams and doing a lot of COVID stuff. Luckily for the patients, that's all calmed down, so it's calmed down for me too, so I can only do one job. But I've picked up a lot with family life. So both of my daughters are playing water polo, so I'm water polo dad. I'm driving them around a lot. So that's been a lot of work, but it's kind of one of the highlights of my life now. I get to enjoy water polo with my daughters, and my wife's getting involved. It's fantastic. So it's super busy, but it's a really great busy. So I wish I could say more was going on with my life, but I drive my kids around.
Well, soon they're getting old enough that they'll be starting to drive each other around, right? You'll have your own personal taxi service, correct?
So soon. Yeah. I got a 15-and-a-half-year-old, so she's at least scaring me by driving around with me in the car.
Both of you guys, and speaking of being on the road, both of you guys have been on the road quite a bit in the last 3 years as an official. Can you guys talk a little bit about some of the places and experiences you guys have done with reffing? I know, Eli, you talked about the ODP Nationals, and I know, Greg, you've done college level as well, and that type of club stuff. So give us kind of, your highlights or some of the big things you see, differences in levels and locations and all that.
Good. Yeah. I mean, the first time I really got out of Ohio was I went out and did a Cap 7 tournament in Orange County. It was like 2018, I think. And it was a very eye-opening experience. I'd never really, outside of Ohio, that was kind of the first time I'd ever seen anything. And I did, some 12 and unders actually, and until then I'd never seen anybody under freshmen in high school. So watching these 12 and under kids play, and that was a very eye-opening experience. One of the coolest things I've ever seen was that 12 and under level out there, in the platinum division. So that was really cool. And then did the ODP Nationals. I did the girls one that about a month after that, so which was very fun. I ended up doing the championship game in the cadet division, which was really, really cool. And then, yeah, those are some of the best trips I did, because I was trying to get a bunch of games in before my daughter was born in 2018. So I was traveling a bunch then. I did so many games that year. I think I did like 280 games in 2018, which was normally before then I'd do about 150 a year. So I was trying to do a bunch before my daughter was born. So yeah, those are some of the highlights of those trips for me.
That younger group, I mean, one, it's funny because sometimes you get teams that don't have caps that can fit the small heads of those kids, and so that's entertaining. But yeah, I watched, like, this summer we ran a 10 and under group, and just seeing those kids and them getting excited about water polo was really cool. But then you go watch some of the film, you're like, that 8-year-old could destroy my varsity team. Like, you get to some of those high level ones, and that are impressive at a young age.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, like I said, the 2-meter play, even at that level, was very impressive for me. It was pretty cool to watch.
Well, Greg, what about you? Where, what have been some of the highlights of your reffing career?
Well, I was studying a little bit. That's what I like to do, to figure out where I've been water polo wise. And I saw the number of states I've refereed, and I was kind of thinking of Mike Jones and Greg Jones and all the places they've ran marathons and Ironmans for Greg Jones. God, that guy's a stud. So I was trying to think, man, I wonder if I could get to 50 states of refereeing, which I don't think I can, because I don't think they have any in North Dakota. But I was thinking maybe half the states. I wonder if I could get to the high 20s. And I don't think I'm there yet, unless I can count California as like 10 states, which I don't think I'm there. But it's a really long state. So now I'm kind of looking. I need to get to Texas, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Oregon, and Washington. I haven't been to those states yet to referee. I know a lot of people there, but so some of my highlights, I've essentially got paid to go all over the country and referee and see cool places and see cool people. This year, and it's mostly COVID related. I'd hate to say it's because I'm the greatest referee in the world. People can't travel as much as they used to, so I'm getting to do some pretty cool assignments. I've got to do some competitive college stuff in Indiana, which has really been a great highlight for me. Later this week, I get to do an Indiana USC game. A couple weeks from now, I get to do Indiana and UCLA. I get to do those with Chad Packer, which is going to be awesome. It's always good refereeing with him. Just so my kids can hear this one day and not be mad at me. I think I've already said this. Probably the highlight of my life is getting to watch my kids play water polo and enjoy it with them. But from the referee standpoint, it's probably getting to do these more competitive games with guys that I'm really good friends with. I mean, this weekend I got to go hang out with Eli Fellers. We referee games. We talked together. We sat on the headsets and we said, "Hey, what do you want to say when we're on the spin lob? This is going to be pretty cool that we get to be on there together." Because I got to say, when I was younger, I wanted to referee water polo to be like a competent referee, and it was kind of a challenge, and I wanted to be competitive. And now that I'm older, I want to enjoy water polo more as a community and hang out with friends and share the game. And I think now that if you would ask me 10 years ago what was my highlight, I'd probably say, oh, I got to referee this really good championship game. And now I'd probably say, oh my gosh, I got to hang out with Eli this weekend. Or after next weekend, I'll say, I got to hang out with Chad Packer and we got paid for it to watch really good water polo. And after this weekend, I'd say, oh, I trapped my kids in the car with me and we talked about water polo on the drive home. That's my current highlight of my water polo career.
You are really good at covering your bases there.
Nobody can be mad at me. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people, mad at me, but not my kids or Eli.
Yeah.
So I got a second level question there for both of you. A, could we have, while you're on headset reffing a game, could we have that on the spin lob just to hear the chatter back and forth? And I'm partially being serious because I think the discussion on those headsets are what you're looking for, you know, what you're seeing. Hey, do you got that back there? Hey, did you see that up here? Hey, watch this guy coming down, or hey, ball's coming on your side. Can we rotate? I'm sure it's pretty minor, but it is superb that communication is going on, because otherwise, without those headsets, it is dead. You don't know. You're just seeing, hopefully he sees that, hopefully she sees that, things like that. Am I right? But maybe one day we can have it on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was because we had the headsets Saturday, but Johnny and I were reffing Friday, and Johnny, like being up north, the only one up by himself, he refs by himself. Every game he's done this season have been by himself. So he was like, I'm like it would have been nice to have the headsets Friday night, because he was like, calling the pool like he was, by himself. And every quarter, I'm like, hey man, I got that pair at the one. You don't have to call that. It's right there for me. And he's like, oh, I'm just so used to having to call the whole pool. So it was great getting that headset on and kind of working with them and Greg and trying to get all on the same page. It's really great.
Yeah, I the people that ref by themselves, that is not easy. Chad has a nice story about me that I had to do the entire Packer Classic by myself back in the day. It was the same weekend as another big tournament, boys tournament, and I was by myself, at least for one day. And he remembers feeding me enormous amounts of food in between games, which was only like 15 minutes, just because he felt so bad. And I'm like, Chad, it's no big deal. As long as, all these coaches keep a level head, and they all understood, and they got it. And thankfully it wasn't like a state championship game. And coaches were pretty nice and players were nice. So, but it was tough. But yeah, I commend Johnny for doing that. Next question I have is, you've all been around the country. I'm sure the style of play is a little bit different than Ohio. Eli, I'll ask you to go first. You think in what areas does it tend to be a little bit more physical, or did you have to like adapt your game to that state a little bit differently because of the state you were in?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it's definitely a big difference, from here and there as far as the level of physicality. That and the guys, the players just know what they're doing. Like for example, like in California, it's like they just know exactly where they need to be every time. I was so nervous the first game I was doing when I was out there, and we go down. I'm on the front. I'm a front court referee. We go down. Very first possession, ball comes in center. I'm freaking out. And the dude, it was like he spun this guy. He's got inside water, drops the ball, whistle penalty, and I was like, "All right, we're good, let's go." But that was like the right then and there. I was like, "Oh, I got this." I just need to see the game a little bit better as far as my when I get there. But yeah, and the motion. Like I know out when the few games I've done out in California is just there's constant movement. They don't hardly ever go down and just sit there. Somebody's always driving. There's always something going on.
Nice, Greg. What about you?
Yeah, I am always amazed at the regionality of water polo. I know this weekend I met with a couple coaches, and we were talking about off the bottoms. They wanted the game called a certain way. Both coaches on the game agreed, and in one breath they said it should be called like this, and then in the next breath they said, when we go to this area next week, we know it's going to be called totally different by this referee. I think everybody just knows it's going to be super different. And I remember when I first came to Ohio, so I moved here in 2005. I remember calling a game in the first couple of weeks, and Mason High School was playing. Mark Sullivan was the coach, and this Mark Sullivan is one of the best at knowing what referees are going to do. This guy's he's won at every level. This guy's a legend in coaching, and his kids all played and won at high levels. And this is a great guy when we talk about referees. I remember calling his game, ball goes into center, exclusion. And he kind of looks at me and yells, "Hey, you can't call an exclusion." We go down the pool again, ball goes into center, exclusion. He's like, "Huh, okay, you're just going to call that every time?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right." So he just started telling his players, "Hey, you can't do this anymore." And that's when it kind of went off in my head, because I grew up in a different area. I remember calling it a certain way and being told to call it a certain way. And I came to Ohio and I called it the way I was told to call it. And it just wasn't, I hadn't gone to other regions. All of a sudden I live in another region and I'm calling it one way and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" But Mark Sullivan is great about it. So yeah, I notice it called different everywhere. I could be in Ohio this week. I remember going to Michigan after I lived in Ohio for a couple of years and was making certain calls, and people came out of the stands and said, "You can't make that call. This is how we call it in Michigan." But that's not unique to Michigan. I gone to Pennsylvania and called it differently, and they said, "Hey, why are you calling it that way here?" I think I said earlier here, like, I've refereed in a lot of states. I could count California in 4 states because I could. I remember being in Los Angeles and calling it a certain way, and Central California, they said, "Hey, what are you doing calling it like that?" And to break up Central California into 2 regions, I remember growing up in kind of the southern region of Central California. And when I would travel up to the northern part of Central California, they wanted it called a different way. Then you'd go to the San Francisco area. Hey, why are you calling it like that? We call it like this. Water polo is just regional. And I don't know that one way is really better than another. I just know that it's different and it's very regional. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've always told my players is you can't expect a rule like a call to be called the same way all the time. So you need to adjust to what the referees are calling because they're gonna hopefully call it consistently that way. And so if you can be the team that adjusts to how the game's being played quicker, then it looks like all the calls are going your way when in reality it's you've adjusted, the other team hasn't. And so you can really use that to your advantage if players can adapt quickly.
Yeah. And I always think if sports is really about teaching the kids what life is like, this is one of the greatest lessons. That's just how life is. And I've seen efforts to make referees all be the same everywhere. And while I think that's good to try to gain some consistency, I don't know that that's life. I don't think that everything is ever going to be the same. I really like the life lesson of teaching people things are going to be a little bit different. People are going to be different. Learn to adapt. Yeah. And I think that's what these great coaches do. They can really teach their kids those lessons.
Yeah. And speaking of change and adapt, we are, into the, fourth week of the season. How have you guys seen with, teams or even you guys calling the new rules? There's, positioning and shots and even hand motions for you guys. How have you guys really seen that progress so far this season?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better. The biggest thing I've noticed is the on a foul outside of 6 feet or just a foul in general, because the players are having a hard time putting the ball into play. They're not having a hard time; they're just not doing it. And that's probably been the biggest thing that I've seen that it's improved, but it still has a little bit ways to go. I know Greg and I were doing a game where we had it happen three times. I think it was 2 or 3 times in a row. Called it a contra foul, didn't put in play, and another one, then another one. But as far as that goes, and then this weekend I finally saw somebody bringing the goalie past half, and they actually scored on it. The second time it happened, they ended up getting countered and got scored on, but that was pretty cool. And then I also saw somebody score from a direct shot from the corner throw, which was really cool. So, yeah.
For all our listeners, Eli, what can you just walk us through then what you guys as referees are looking for on getting the ball live again, and what doesn't constitute getting live?
Yeah, so we're looking for separation. What you guys, I know coaches describe as popping it. That clear separation from the hand and the ball. I would say the most common is kids that just on like a contra foul, they just swim right up to the ball. That is no longer putting it in play, and it needs to be picked up and then dropped in front of them if they're going to swim with it. That's the biggest thing. And what we're looking at is, if we draw a foul, then the kids just oftentimes they pick it up and try to and just kind of pump fake it, and then never actually put it in play. We're actually, we're looking for that clear separation. And then, sometimes see this newer players are just sit with the ball and they actually don't really do anything with it. So.
Greg, what about you? What have you seen? What maybe even for referees, what has been the biggest, adjustment you guys have had to do?
Yeah, I've been telling my partners, like, you guys are really going to have to help me with this putting the ball into play thing. Doing this for so many years, and there hasn't been an emphasis on putting the ball in play. We just always kind of considered it was in play after 2 or 3 seconds if someone swam with the ball. But this year, there's just that huge emphasis. We really we really want to see separation between the player's hand and the ball. They'll say air between the hand and the ball. So that's the big change I've seen for players, and for, at least for me as a referee, trying to really pay better attention to that. And I think it's going to be good for the game once everybody gets used to it, because the defense really wants to play defense a lot of times, and they don't always know when they can go and play. When is the ball actually in play that they can go? So this separation between hand and ball is really gonna help. What I've noticed confusion wise though is, and Eli and I were talking, we had the headsets this weekend, so we were talking about this, that players are like over putting the ball into play, or they're thinking they always have to put the ball into play. So we still have that rule where you can shoot outside of 6 directly after a foul. So that's great. Nobody can play defense on you. If you got an ordinary foul outside 6, I can pick it up and shoot it. Nobody can come and attack me. What I found now is players think they have to put everything in play. So they get fouled outside of 6, they put it in play. They separate their hand from the ball, and then they go to shoot it. So now the defense can attack them. I've almost seen 0 direct shots outside of 6. Almost exclusively, I see people putting it in play and then shooting, like they think they have to. So there's probably some confusion there. There's almost like an overemphasis on putting the ball in play. That's probably the biggest bit of confusion that I've seen. So if I could help players, I'd be like, oh, you guys can still take direct shots. You could be creating a lot more offense. Because really, this whole putting the ball into play outside of 6 meters when you get fouled is all about creating more offense, because you can shoot it as soon as you put the ball into play. You can create even more offense if you just took the direct shot and they can't play defense on you. So I'm hoping that a little bit of that confusion goes away and we get even more offense out of it, because that's really the emphasis on most of these new rules that are coming out. More offense. Pop it, put it in play outside 6. You can shoot it. You don't have to pass anybody anymore. The goalie can come out past half, which I love because I used to be a goalie. So you can come out and shoot. Those have been great. I love to see more offense.
So I have a follow-up question for both of you, and either one can go. Eli can go first, but now as a referee, your scenario changes. So if there's a foul outside of 6, let's say, there's more options for the offensive team to perform, or if they're coming off of a timeout, there's more things, last 20 seconds of a quarter, there's more options for them to do by pulling the goalie up or whatever it might be. Like in normal, rules prior to this year, prior to all these changes, like you had probably 3 or 4 different multiple choice options that they're going to do. Now it's probably like 6 or 7. Like, how is that going through your mindset as you're preparing for these moments? Let's just call them.
Yeah, I mean, it's I know Greg and I had talked about this earlier on this season. It was just like there's so many more things to watch, especially on a foul outside of 6 meters. Now we got to kind of what we call babysit the foul a lot more often, because we have to make sure that ball's put into play, because they can now shoot it after it's in play. There's just a lot more. There can be so much more going on, and there's a lot more to pay attention to. Yeah, for me, it's just been that's probably been the hardest thing is now paying a lot more attention to everything else that's going on while for example for the when the player's putting the ball into play after a foul, or now you're not hamstringed by if there's a counter attack going the other way, you can still call that foul, that exclusion in the backcourt, because it doesn't take away the advantage from the attack that's going on. So there's definitely a lot more to do now, which is great. I love it. Like Greg said, it's all about creating that more offense, and I think that's really helped. It's really going to help us in a couple of years, once the coaches are able to coach more of these new rules and you're going to see the kids are going to understand them more. Now, right now, this first month or so, everybody's just kind of getting used to it. So it's going to, I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Both of you guys mentioned more offense, and since now you kind of have to watch for that 6 meter line, would you ever want the 2-point shot to come back?
Yeah, bring the 2-point shot back. Love that. How long ago was that? I remember it must have been a long time.
2001, maybe.
Yeah, I know it was the year before. They didn't have it in high school, but I think they got rid of it in college the year before I went to Dayton.
What year was that?
They knew you were coming there, and they didn't want you to score every point of the game, so they dropped the whole thing, right?
Fall of 2001 is when I was there, but I remember my John Schneider, lead scorer for Dayton, because all I did was sit outside the 7, get fouled, and score a 2-point shot.
Oh yeah.
He goes, no one learns. Don't foul me, I don't score.
Well, who among us have scored a 2-point shot? There's the question.
I have not.
Not me.
I
That's
have
long
not.
before me.
Oh, you guys are all losers. I scored a 2-pointer.
That would make the goalie shot so much more impressive because it's worth 2 points.
Oh, yeah.
I think I did it in 1996 in a junior college game.
All right, so these new rules, Eli, you kind of alluded to it a little bit as far as helping the sport, and we're already talking about 2-point shots. It's going to create higher scoring games eventually if that comes back. So, Greg, what do you think? How do you think these new rules are going to help grow the sport or in the right direction?
Yeah, I don't know if it's growing it in the right direction, but it's definitely growing in a direction. I'm not saying it's in the wrong direction, but it is definitely with more offense. And I don't mind more offense. If you look at sports, football, basketball, they're making rules to create more offense. People like watching it. It's fun. Nobody really wants to watch a game that's 2-2. And I think that's what we've had in water polo. I think we've had at the higher levels just people can drop. And then you've got people stuck outside shooting. You could go and foul somebody anywhere and then just drop back on the center. So what I really like about these new rules is you can't really just go and foul and drop anymore. So you foul, that person, if they're outside of 6, can put it in play and do something. I love that the goalie can come out. Another really great thing, probably the best thing that we're doing in high school and USA water polo is where if I have inside water and someone fouls me from behind and I'm inside of 6 meters, I'm going to get a penalty. There's no more I have to drop the ball. I mean, that defense really has to either decide I'm going to let you go or I'm going to risk this being called a penalty, even if the ball's in hand, which I really like. So I think as a referee, we've always been taught, let's try to reward really good offense. If the offense gets in a good position, if they can get a pass to the player who's in the best position, we want to reward them. And often we weren't able to, because if the offense was holding the ball, even if the defense did everything wrong and they were laying on a guy and they were hitting them, if that offense was holding the ball, we couldn't do anything. So a lot of times there was a shot, the ball squirted away, there was just weird stuff. And it's like, oh, the offense did so much good stuff and they're not getting anything. And the defense did everything wrong and they got bailed out. So these new rules where you get to call a penalty now, if the offense has done everything right and the defense kind of just hits them the wrong way, hacks them the wrong way, is doing the wrong stuff. I really like that. I think it's going to help to really reward. I remember talking to a coach this weekend. It's almost kind of like that psychology of Pavlov's dog. You're training people so they can, every time something good happens, they play really good offense, something good happens to them. Too much in the past, it was players are doing really, really good stuff, things that coaches are teaching, and then they didn't get rewarded. It's kind of like, why are they going to keep doing that? Now they're going to do really good stuff, and they're going to get rewarded much more often. So they're going to keep doing it. So in that way, I think it's going to be really good for the sport. It's going to reinforce what coaches, our calls are going to reinforce more often what coaches are teaching. And I think that's going to be great for the game. It's going to have more scoring, but I think better than anything else, it's going to reinforce this good coaching that people are doing.
So beyond just the new rules, what do you guys feel is the most misinterpreted rule by players and misinterpreted rules by fans?
I'd say,
right, Eli?
I was gonna say the questions I get asked often is, and if I call like a goalie, for example, a goalie comes out and fouls a player, I get more complaints about me calling a penalty on that and it not being an ordinary. So the fact that that coaches don't understand that is probably like the most common, in my opinion, the most common misinterpretation that I personally seen.
Yeah, I think the first most understood call is ball under, and then like a close second behind that is ball under, and I think right behind that third is when the ball goes underwater. There can't be. I've never had more people yell at me about a ball under. I've never heard more parents, more players, more coaches. It's ball under, ball under, ball under. Yeah, and I'd say that's the hardest one to understand because there's two different. And Nick and I have had conversations about this a lot. I know.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it is the rule is stated two different ways in the rule book, so it's not even easy for referees. So
what is your not tying you to a specific every time, but like what is a good way for people to understand that the rules? So Eli, what is the rule then for the goalies so people can understand that? And same thing, Greg, what is it that they're looking for the two rules you guys mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's no ordinary fouls for a goal on a goalie. I mean, a goalie comes out to challenge the play. There's you, you better get the ball, or that's kind of, the goalie doesn't get the ball, it's going to be a foul, or it's either going to be exclusion outside of 6 now or a penalty inside of 6. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I might be getting kind of old as a referee. I'm only 43. I'm not that old, but I feel like I'm old as a referee. I can still remember, and this is probably kind of an old school way of calling it. I remember one of the FINA technical committee members. He came, only God knows why he came out to Central California, and he came out to do a water polo clinic for us. And we were talking about ball unders, and this guy kind of from the FINA rules and interpretations, he kind of said, hey, the reason this rule is in there is because people used to be holding the ball and someone would push them underwater, and so they wouldn't die, we had to call something. I was like, great. So he was kind of like, yeah, we're not calling ticky-tack ball unders. We're not, if that ball goes, if someone's holding the ball and it goes under and it's under for a long time, you need to turn it over because the ball ain't coming up, and we play water polo with the ball above the water. And I've always remembered that. And I've looked. I've got to be pretty sure the ball's underwater and it's staying underwater and it's affecting the game, because it's very true. The ball needs to be above the water so you can play. If it's underwater and it stays under there for a while, we got to do something. And you'll hear some referees talk about it like this. They'll say, "I need to be able to say the word ball under. If it's under that long, then I know for sure that it's all the way under." And that's a lot of the way I think about it. Because I want to be 100% sure it was under. If I can't be sure, if I can't say the word ball under, was it really all the way under? Was it mostly under? Was it a millisecond under? And I know there's a coach. He was my neighbor growing up, and we played water polo together. Now he's coaching, and we talk about ball unders a lot. And he always says, "Yeah, my player can't hold it under for longer than a couple of seconds, that we don't deserve to get the ball under." And that just kind of goes into my theory of, yeah, it needs to be under for a little bit. If you're on defense and you force that ball under and it's under a millisecond, should that really be a turnover? Is that really what we're doing? If the philosophy is really about keeping the ball above water and not letting people get drowned underwater. So I think that's the hardest part. Some referees, we were talking about that regionality of calls. If it's under a millisecond and it's called in some regions, you get another region they want it to be under a second, another region they go under a couple seconds. It makes it, I understand why it's hard for fans and coaches because it's called a little bit differently. But and I think that's why it's the hardest. I think when I see fans, if they see the ball go under, they don't care why it went under. It's like ball under, ball under. And they don't know. I mean, they don't have training like I do as a referee. They don't get the talks like coaches do. So it's just a hard thing to understand. You really need I've needed lessons in it. I had to be told by a member of the FINA technical committee how it was done. So it's just, it's misunderstood. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to call. It's hard to watch. And to make it even worse, ball under is called differently. So if I have the ball and I'm on offense and a defender pushes the ball under with my hand on it, that's a ball under. But there's also the rule of it being challenged. So if I'm on offense and I pull the ball under so you on defense can't get to it, that's also a ball under. So there's two different ways it can be called. And that makes it even harder for coaches to understand, definitely for fans to understand, and harder for referees to call.
Mm-hmm.
You've officially confused every one of our
yes
followers, listeners, and myself.
That's the key. Ball under is confusing. It's confusing.
Greg, and I think I told you that was my first "you've been yelling too much" notification from you. It was actually about this call.
We're doing our best.
It's funny is like you talking about ball under and regionality is like I was reffing JO qualifiers in St. Louis and all these the refs I was there with. They weren't from St. Louis, kept calling, hey, watch out for the St. Louis refs. They have they call it a St. Louis ball under or something. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, they like to call real fast ball unders. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, I'm doing a game with a St. Louis guy, and it was as soon as that ball went under, boom, he would whistle the ball under, and I'm like, whoa, that was quick. So, yeah.
And you actually see that in players, depending on if they do some club stuff, and if they start playing, games outside of Ohio or outside of the region, they'll pick that stuff up, and so they'll get confused as to why it is or isn't called when they come back here. For lots of different rules. Well, they didn't call this in this place. I'm like, well, they're calling it here, so don't do that.
Yeah.
All right, final segment.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Final questions we have for each of you, more of a fun thing. So, Columbus area, Eli, what is your favorite restaurant that you and your wife, or maybe your kid too, like to go to?
Oh yeah, probably the Schmidt's Sausage House. It's a German restaurant down in German Village. It's absolutely amazing. Great German beer. They have a all-you-can-eat sausage buffet that is absolutely amazing. I recommend it to anybody who's comes to Columbus.
Good to know. Geez, that sounds like a gold mine. That's awesome. Greg, what about you? And you cannot say like Shake Shack or Smoothie King or whatever.
It's the Dayton version of the sausage place. No. So I've liked a lot of places in Dayton. Columbus, Tommy's Pizza. I love that. It tastes a lot like a place that I grew up in California. Dayton, the new place I've been going to, and Mike, you're going to appreciate this, Wheat Penny. Great Italian food, fantastic pizza, one of the best places to go for mixed drinks. They have good bourbon, and a great wine list. Wheat Penny, downtown Dayton. You're not gonna miss going to that. It's not the most popular. It's not like, I think a lot of people would say Pine Club. If you go to Dayton, you gotta go to Pine Club. Wheat Honey for sure.
Well, and those are now our new unofficial sponsors of this podcast as well.
Well, gentlemen, it was more of a fun laugh and discussion with both of you than a formal podcast. We really enjoyed having you on. It sounds like, in the first 4 weeks of the high school season, it's been going fairly well. I've been watching a lot of video and live streaming, and it's so much fun and exciting that we're back to this level. And I appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday evening. You both have families that you could be spending time with, but yet you're spending time with the Spin Lab. And we thank you. Nick, any closing remarks to the two guests?
No, just looking forward to seeing you guys on the pool deck in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I have my money on Eli giving Nick the first red card between the two of you. So there's that. So
I know when to stop talking. Once I've been told that they heard me, I stop talking.
I hear you, Nick.
All right, gentlemen. Well, farewell. Thank you again, and we'll definitely have you back on in some future episode.
Yep. Thanks for having us, guys. Go nuts for the love of the game.
Absolutely, guys. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. And we are going to be moving on to our final closing remarks. So the Spin Lab is produced and recorded live by Mike Jones and Nick Helwig. It's supported by the Ohio Squirrels Water Polo Club. You're never too old to get into the game. Go nuts. And also by Marlins Water Polo. For the love of the game, there's Marlins Water Polo. And our theme music is produced by Jason Shaw at audioandaudix.com. See you next time on the Spin Lab.